All right, here we go. The next question. What about nasal resonance, mask resonance? Also, is it common to really feel high notes in the forehead, around the eyes, etc.? And once again, most of this presentation was about how we experience physically sound. So about nasal resonance, mask resonance, there's the question mark. When we feel that, what are we feeling? Is it common to feel high notes in the forehead, around the eyes? I would say not everybody experiences things the same way. Some people have a very intense sensation. I even know singers that have a headache when they're done performing because it's so intense for them. But you also mentioned, depending on the frequency, frequency, we may be experiencing sympathetic physical experiences that aren't directly related to sound. So I guess the question is mostly about, or do we really experience it in the forehead, in the mask area? Is that a real thing, or is that coming from somewhere else?
Well, I always approach this from not denying the experience a singer has had. If they've had this experience, they've had this experience.
Yes.
I would say as a teacher, or as you're like monitoring your technique, to remember that the nasal cavity is a very poor resonator as far as resonating the radiated sound.
Now, let me ask you, because there's a lot of talk about this, but what's your opinion? I mean, the nasal cavity, there's a big space in there, but it's full. It's not empty space. And is that the main reason that it's not a good resonator because it's just full?
Well, I look at it this way. The vowel resonances, when we're singing, when we're speaking, they're constantly in motion. The mouth is where the tongue is primarily. Yeah, that's where a lot of the movement happens. There aren't any moving parts in your nose, hopefully. So when there's airflow through the nose, we're bypassing where most of the magic happens with articulation, and we're sapping energy away from that. That's how I conceptualize it in my teaching. And it's very easy because of how we, in my presentation, talking about experiencing very high frequencies as being localized sound. And as we approach 6,000 hertz, more and more like experiencing that as localized sound in the skull, even though it's coming from somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
And I experience this in my own voice. I experience it when I hear my classical soprano students singing really well as they go up. I experience that in my own body. I experience the sensation of when they sing it really well, hearing that sound more in my skull instead of in my body.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
Yeah, and so I think that plays into this. And then also we tend to confuse high frequency energy as being nasal.
Yeah, that is true. That is true.
So I would say that's kind of that's where I would nuance the answer to that question.
I use a simple trick, helps a lot of people with resonance balancing. You just take a hum, right? Let's say you can do it on a neutral note. Find there's some space between the teeth where it starts vibrating. Now if you take that pretty neutral larynx position, if we add a smile, inevitably, I was almost everybody says it increases what they feel in the top. And if they lower the larynx by dropping the jaw a little bit, then they're experiencing more of this bass quality, and then the sensation's more downward. So trying to get those both on at the same time is an easy balancing tool. But is there something to do with the frequencies, why we feel it up there?
Well, as far as like really digging down to all the different stimuli that we experience in our face, that will take quite a bit more time. What we can say is, as far as what we are feeling up there, um, we're not feeling the vibrations of the singer's hormone cluster.
Hmm.
That we can say. Um, can we say all the things, like identify all the things and where they're coming from? No, I don't think we're there yet. But we can start to, like, when we're talking about vibrotactile, we can look at where the response to these vibrations have been mapped, where the receptors have been mapped so far, and that work is ongoing. And we can look at the receptors that the body has and look at their limits, their bandwidths, where they're strong, where they're weak, where they don't work. And so we can say pretty strongly, you're not feeling the vibrations of the singer's harmonic cluster. Perhaps you're feeling the vibrations of the fundamental frequency or the second harmonic, maybe. And when you have a really strong singer's harmonic cluster, the lower tones are also strong. Or there might be a sensation of pressure.
Yeah.
And that, I think, and I don't know of any research that has really locked that down yet, because that's much more elusive. But I think this does free up to say, okay, we hear the singer's harmonic cluster, we feel the lower tones.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, at the end of the day, we need some guidance. Everybody needs some guidance from a professional coach, because your sensation is going to be very unique. Most people do feel it up here in the mask, especially of sopranos, tenors, people singing higher pitches. But I know a lot of basses that feel their low notes up here too. They work very hard for that. So whether that's just a sensation that guides them or not, I think as long as it's working for you, great. It sounds like also to me, there's still a lot of research to be done before we can claim to know anything for sure, right?